I have the privilege also right now to introduce one of the unsung heroes of Thank God for Bitcoin, and that is Mr. Ahshuwah Hawthorne. Ahshuwah is actually the inspiration for this conference. I had forgotten this, and then he has to perpetually remind me that, hey, Jordan, you remember whose idea it was to actually do this conference? And I'm like, oh yeah, that was you. So Ahshuwah is a cross-cultural worker. He's planted a church. He was, if you can imagine, suffering for Jesus on the island of Hawaii. You know, very, very difficult life he was living. So he is here this morning to talk about just the ways that Bitcoin solves real-world problems for people all over the world, especially those who have less, especially the poor, especially those who are less privileged than many of us here. So if you would, welcome Ahshuwah Hawthorne.
Hey, good morning. You guys enjoying the conference? Dude, it's been awesome. Okay, as Jordan mentioned, I'm talking about the use cases of Bitcoin and its purposes in the world. So, the question that I have is, why does Bitcoin exist? It's a question I want to help us answer, but more foundational than that question is another one. And that is, why do you and I exist? And perhaps the best known biblical answer to that question comes from the Westminster Shorter Catechism. You may have heard it. It asks the question, what is the chief end of man? And then, of course, gives the answer. Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Nothing is more important than knowing and living according to the purpose for which you were created, right? We know this instinctively. When you use something according to its design, it will flourish. If you use it contrary to how it's been designed, it is harmed, it destroys itself, and it harms those things that it interacts with. Like using a blender to mix cement, or a chainsaw to cut your 5-year-old's birthday cake. It doesn't end well. Living our lives contrary to the purpose to which we were created can have devastating consequences. And it would be a tragedy if anyone left this event understanding Bitcoin better, but not understanding their own soul. Jesus says, "What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul?" In due time, we really believe Bitcoin can buy you the world, but it cannot save your soul. And Jesus tells a parable. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found, right? And he covered it up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. If you're a Bitcoiner, you know well that experience. Of knowing about an underpriced asset that's hidden from others, that they don't know about, and you go out and sell all that you have, even your chairs, to buy that asset, right? You know about something that the market doesn't know about, and you leverage the extra knowledge that you have. The same dynamic exists when it comes to our relationship with God and the design of our souls. The treasure, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ, is so precious that those who find it will give up anything in order to ensure that it is theirs. They'll even give up their Bitcoin. So as we talk about Bitcoin today, I want us to be clear that it is but a vague shadow of the true hidden treasure, which is the love of God in Christ Jesus. But I also, right, I want us to see that this is a tool. It is an important tool that we can use for the glory of God. And in order to use this tool to God's glory, we need to understand its purpose and its uses. So that brings me to the topic for today, right? The purposes of Bitcoin. And I'm gonna use the study of teleology, right? The study of the purposes and goals of things to look at the purpose of Bitcoin from 3 different angles. So first is the intrinsic purpose. Intrinsic purpose means the purpose that's within a thing, within its very nature or design, what it was made to do. Then we will look at the extrinsic purpose of a thing. It's functions that it plays for its users, for those who interact with it. That's where we'll get into those practical, everyday use cases. And then finally, we're going to look at the ultimate purpose, right? This is the final or most significant purpose that something has or is designed to achieve. So that's where we're going this morning. So first, the intrinsic purpose of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's intrinsic purpose is the function as a decentralized digital currency. Its design inherently aims to facilitate peer-to-peer transactions without the need for a central authority providing financial autonomy and security. So as the Satoshi white paper explains, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Now, this is not a technical talk. I'm not particularly a technical person, so I won't be getting into the details of how Bitcoin works. But I do want to set a context for understanding Bitcoin, and often as you go down the rabbit hole, you realize that an important question to answer is, what is money, right? It's one that we often kind of assume, and then we go on and use that money. So an important understanding is, well, what actually is money? So here's how Bitcoin interacts with, and it fits into the history of money. And so here you see from physical primitive things like the shells and stones to precious metals that were then backing certificates, and finally fiat. And then ultimately here is the digital evolution of money. Now, one other chart to explain that is comparing the US dollar to Bitcoin. And here you have the dollar, right, which is a settlement, right, that is through a centralized party such as banks or credit card companies, and then its issuance of new money is based on the decision of a few powerful people. In contrast, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer in its settlement. That means there's no need to go through a centralized bank or corporation. And then additionally, the issuance of new money is based on publicly auditable computer code that sets the supply schedule and the supply cap. It's not changeable beyond the consensus, right? And it's not determined in a smoky back room. Now, one other piece for understanding Bitcoin and what it is in its intrinsic nature is to understand its monetary policy. Now, you don't have to be technical, right? Just like we use and browse the internet without understanding HTML, we don't have to be technical to make sense of Bitcoin. And I think a good angle to understand it better is to look at its monetary policy that's coded into its software. So what is that monetary policy? Well, it's a supply-capped, energy-backed currency with a predictable and ever-decreasing inflation rate. I looked it up. We're at about 19.8 million out of 21 million coins which have been mined. And it's based on proof of work, or biblically we would call that sowing and reaping. If you want to, quote unquote, print new Bitcoins, you need to expend energy. You can't just turn on a money printer. Second, this aspect of the monetary policy is that it's a global, open, and permissionless network accessible to anyone with internet access. It's inherently egalitarian and not a respecter of persons. Or we would say it biblically, it promotes justice and shows no partiality in how it's designed. And then finally, it enables cryptographically secured property rights and payment rails that make government and corporate seizure and censorship impossible. Or we would say it biblically, it's governed through truth and law and not power and politics. Now, disclaimer, if the government still have the guns, right, they can convince you to give them your keys. But inherent within what it is, it cannot be censored by government. Okay, so that's the monetary policy and its supply issuance, which is coded, right? So what that means is there can be no bailouts, no government debt, no on-demand money printing. It's a store of value currency like gold with its limited supply, predictable issuance, and at the same time, it has the speed, programmability, and encryption of a digital dollar designed for the internet. So that's the intrinsic purpose of Bitcoin, to be this peer-to-peer cash system. Now let's look at the extrinsic purpose of Bitcoin. Bitcoin serves various extrinsic purposes based on the needs of its users. These purposes may or may not have been intended by its creator, but they've emerged as Bitcoin has evolved and been used in various contexts and situations. So this is where, like I said, we'll look at how it solves real-world problems of people around the world. And it'd be impossible to talk about every usage. And of course, if I was Chairman Gensler, I would tell you about all the nefarious purposes and uses. But right, with this audience, I want to focus on, I think, the uses that would be most relevant for us. So we'll go through a handful of them. First, nonprofits are hedging against inflation and beating the market by adding an asset with 151% annualized return to their endowments. I love this chart. If you've never seen it, I use this for the investment committee of our nonprofit organization as we talk through our own endowment strategy and how Bitcoin would play into that. And I looked, I said, guys, look at the comparison of all these different asset classes. And there's no comparison. Bitcoin has outperformed everything over the last 15 years. And there are a handful of nonprofits and more growing that are integrating Bitcoin into their investment strategy to fund kingdom work. Next, you probably heard the story, the Canadian truckers. They received $900,000 in donations in Bitcoin after their government had closed their bank accounts and stopped their GoFundMe campaign. If you're not familiar with the story, it's absolutely amazing, right? They're protesting COVID restrictions, and to kind of try to stop the protest and get back at these citizens operating and protesting, they shut down their bank accounts. So a bunch of people raised money for them. So they shut down their GoFundMe. So there's another Christian crowdsource org that says, oh, we'll do it. Government won't shut us down. So the government shut them down anyway. And then finally a bunch of Bitcoiners got together and said, they can't stop Bitcoin. And so they ended up raising $900,000 and putting the keys in envelopes and hand-delivering instructions and keys for wallets to individual truck drivers that were protesting. So, yeah, it was awesome. It's an awesome story. Next, mission work is being funded safely in countries where Christians are persecuted and the government censors and surveils economic activity. So here's just a visual of where in the world Christians are most persecuted. And in those contexts, if you want to fund ministry, you need to be secret about it. Like the government wants to kill or arrest or deport those doing gospel ministry. So you can't just be like, oh, okay, put our church name on our bank account and go open our account. Like you have to find alternative ways to fund ministry. And it's been incredible the last couple years researching how this is being done. We know of one Christian leader who's working in a largely closed country and funding like several tens of thousands of dollars a month into that closed country, all using Bitcoin. And not only are they doing that like without surveillance, they do it and they make a premium when they sell the Bitcoin in that country. Okay, so not only are they, like, often orgs will put money in a backpack, like cash in a backpack, and just fly into places. They just do crazy things to get money into these hard places, like old school, like it's 1940s, and we're like God smuggler. Like that still happens today. Praise God for it. But you know what? There's actually something called Bitcoin, and you can like push a button, and they have as much value as you need to send them instantaneously. So, just one other important use case. So, next one, refugees fleeing from war and persecution are taking unconfiscatable assets with them. So I've worked with refugees for the last decade in Portland, Oregon. And yeah, like it can happen overnight where there's a war or some situation where you just have to flee with your family, and it's whatever you can put in your backpack. There's stories from Ukraine when Russia first attacked, right? So a number of people that were going to be in the areas where there was going to be fighting, they tried to flee the country and cross the border. Well, what do you do first? If it's all unknown, you don't know when you're going to be able to return home, well, you need to get your assets. You need to find your money so you can survive when you cross a border. So where do you go? Or where do you, if you store your money, right? You probably have to go to the bank. Well, what happens when everyone is doing that? Well, there's no money left in the bank, or the banks just close their door. The same thing happened in Afghanistan when we had our glorious departure from that country, and the Taliban took over overnight, right? Immediately, they go to the banks. The banks are shut. So if you had your values stored in Bitcoin, and there are stories where this has happened, you just cross a border. You don't hope the ATM has money. You have your money. So this is actual use case. Next, women in repressive communities are engaging in commerce outside the systems that exclude them. So this is a picture of Roya Mahboob. It's a great Bitcoin Magazine article about what she did of starting this tech company in Afghanistan. And under the Taliban, women weren't allowed to have bank accounts and run their own businesses, have their own money. And so what did she have to use? Well, the existing system excluded her, and so she started a tech company, trained women in computer coding, taught them about Bitcoin, and paid them in Bitcoin. And the patriarchal society that they lived in couldn't stop them. Yeah, that's worth clapping for too. Diaspora people are sending funds to their homelands without needing permission or paying excessive fees. And here's the way remittances work. And it's a huge thing for the immigrant community, refugee communities where they live in parts of the world, whether it's North America, whether it's like Dubai. They live in like industrialized, wealthy areas, and then they send their money back home. Now, the more unbanked you are, and the more impoverished you are, or like depending on the financial freedoms of your country, the worse it is for you, the more expensive it is to send your money back home, right? The more rent seekers there are in that process. So Bitcoin solves this. It absolutely solves this, going from this archaic analog technology or Western Union or all these different methods, and just says, hey, click or tap. Send your money back home. And this is, of course, you know the story of El Salvador, how that's happened and added so much value to those communities. Next, communities are being transformed through sustainable economic development that gives them hope for the future. I had the privilege of visiting Hope House in Bitcoin Beach this last November, and it's just amazing to see the transformation in that community. And here, and you'll get to hear from Mike Peterson later today, Bitcoin has supercharged their community development work. Like a lot of people don't realize he moved to El Salvador and served as a missionary. He wants to see God's kingdom come and the good of the people there. And Bitcoin just supercharged what they were already trying to do and did it in an empowering way. And as I've talked to Mike, he explains, he says, there are so many unexpected second and third order effects from teaching people about Bitcoin and starting a circular economy. And that biggest one that they didn't necessarily expect going into it is it gives people hope for the future. That all of a sudden they have an asset that they can store safely, that appreciates in value, because most people in the world don't have access to the New York Stock Exchange, right, to store their assets. And so here they are. They have something that they can save with. Wow, okay, now I can buy a moped. With that moped, I can start a delivery business. With the money from that delivery business, I can save to send my kids to college or to school. Like, there's hope now for the future that comes as an effect of introducing Bitcoin to a community. We have just a couple more. Unbanked people have access to instant low-fee payments and secure asset custody. So these are pictures from Guatemala, the Bitcoin Lake project, as well as Motive, Peru. We got to spend some time with the leader of that ministry when we were in El Salvador. In Peru, they're doing some amazing things. They have upwards of like 14 or 15 different little mini circular economies, and they're giving access to Bitcoin to these tribal people that are entirely unbanked. And some amazing stories that are coming out of those projects. People living under extreme inflation are storing value in an asset with a limited supply cap that preserves their wealth. And these are pictures from Lebanon and from Zimbabwe. And again, lots of stories where we know a leader that leads a Christian school in Lebanon, and he takes his funding from the States, he auto-converts it to Bitcoin. So his org, his supporters, they don't have to hold Bitcoin. He just has them pay him in Strike. It auto-converts it to Bitcoin. And then when it's time to pay the rent or buy groceries or buy things for the school, he goes to the local currency dealer, trades his Bitcoin for lira, and spends it that day. And so because of Bitcoin, he entirely avoids the broken banking system, entirely avoids the broken currency, and is able to give value for himself and his ministry just like that. And then here's the last one. Previously off-grid, rural communities are receiving affordable and reliable electricity, which dramatically improves their quality of life. And I'm sure you've heard stories you'll hear later today from Eric Hirschman and Gridless. We had the privilege of spending time with them in March and seeing the work that they're doing. Right? They're on the cutting edge of energy sustainability, using Bitcoin as that buyer of last resort to fund the electrification of off-grid African communities. Yeah, I can't wait for his session to hear more about it. So there are many use cases, right? And still many more to be discovered. And I've had the privilege the last 2 years researching these things. And it's been so excited to meet some of you and work with some of you. And where you have ideas, where you're like, this has to happen. I see this need. Like, I think Bitcoin can fix that. I would love to talk to you. I would love to help support you. I would love to help fund you. I would let's collaborate and find the best ideas, and let's start new things. And now in closing, we're going to look at the ultimate purpose. Oh yeah, and this is, if you want to come talk to me, Brilliance Labs is our organization. We have a booth. So here's the ultimate purpose of Bitcoin. It is the complete democratization of finance. It aims to give individuals control over their own money, reduce the power of centralized financial institutions, and foster economic freedom. The ultimate result of this will be a more equitable, global financial system. So we understand the intrinsic purpose by just understanding, hey, this is how it's designed. Extrinsic purpose is how it's used. Now, the ultimate purpose, I would say we can find that by some of the hints that Satoshi laid for us. And so you have the Bitcoin white paper. You have the Genesis block. We won't go into too much details here about what we know about Satoshi Nakamoto, but we do know this, that he you could say, nailed to the wall of a web forum his white paper on Reformation Day 2008. And then he launched it in January 2009. And the first ledger entry has this little Easter egg saying, right, quoting from the Times of that day, the chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. And so it was in this context of the great financial crisis, these bailouts, that Bitcoin was launched. And many who have studied the origins and purposes of Bitcoin believe that it was created to solve the problems that are inherent in government fiat currency. So fiat, you probably know, it means to declare by decree. In the same way that God creates through his word, so fiat currency is money created by the declaration of a government. It's not backed by anything. So when a government prints money out of nothing, not only are they stealing value from everyone else that holds that currency, they're actually playing God, right? They're trying to create ex nihilo, out of nothing, and they're ignoring the law of sowing and reaping, which God has established in all of creation. Now, Some people say, oh, well, I don't think the system's broken. Was that really necessary? Do we really need a whole new system? And I only got time to run through this very quickly. But just 2 quotes. George Washington, he didn't like the idea of paper money. He says this. He says, paper money has had the effect in your state that it will ever have to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice. My, how far we've come. And then here is John Maynard Keynes, who is the father of our modern economic system. And he says this, I should support all sorts of policies for increasing the propensity to consume. Do you hear that? That is the incentive built within our monetary system. Keynes believed that people were primarily consumers. We know as Christians that people are made in the image of God, and they are primarily producers and stewards of our system. This economic system that we deal with today is built on a false understanding of the imago Dei and leads to the pursuit of momentary pleasure and consumption rather than generational investment and wise stewardship. Incentives lead to our behavior, and our economic system is built to incentivize consumption. We need a better system that incentivizes stewardship and investment. Now, and here's just, again, this is what this has turned into, debasement of the dollar. You guys know this stuff, from 30 Hershey's bars in 1913 to barely getting a McDonald's coffee. I think they're now at $1.17 last time I checked. It's probably even more now. And then here's just another, here's my funnest favorite inflation chart. Elon Musk shared this a few months back. Golden Gate Bridge, 1937, it cost $700 million, adjusted for inflation. So that's today's money, $700 million, took 4 years, the Golden Gate. Now, we had to create nets under the Golden Gate. Now, why do we need to do that? Well, that's a whole nother conversation, right? But those nets cost $400 million and took 6 years to make. Now, this proves 2 things, right? We are like going to hell in a handbasket, and our inflation numbers don't get to the real heart of the issue, right? It's not apples for apples. Oh, bridge is $700 million after inflation. Nets are $400 million. What's the, value for value? You want a net or the Golden Gate Bridge? It just, I don't know. Someone else explain that to me. I don't get it. And then here's our final slide is global inflation. We have it the best in the world. Like, we're complaining about the fact that we can't build infrastructure and things cost too much. Here's a chart of global inflation, where the 20 countries with the highest inflation average 42.5% annually, while the G20 countries average just 4.2%. Yeah, and then I'll end with this. The corporate welfare system and the bank bailouts. This is all from the 2008 financial crisis. But you see, the closer you are to the money printer, the more powerful you are in the system. You get the bailout, you get the corporate welfare, and the rest of us are left holding the bag. And so I'm going to end with a short video. Actually, this is the last point. Bitcoin exists to replace the broken fiat system, but the ultimate purpose of Bitcoin is to glorify God. And each one of us, our churches and our ministries, have the opportunity to use Bitcoin as a tool to accomplish the mission of God in the world. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. And so in closing, I want to play a video. And we had the privilege of partnering with TGFB to travel to El Salvador in November, hosted by Mike Peterson. And we did a summit training Christian leaders and then trained missionaries to use Bitcoin as a tool for the ministry. And so here's just a little glimpse of that trip.
El Zonte is a beautiful but tiny surf town on the coast of El Salvador. It's not something that before would have ever attracted global attention. And yet today El Zonte is the best example that we have of how Bitcoin can transform a local economy. Mike Peterson came to El Salvador a number of years ago to serve the people and the missionaries who lived in this town. Years later, the town has been turned upside down, in part because of magic internet money that we call Bitcoin.
This all began about 3 years ago as I was serving, working with refugees, working with a number of mission organizations, and I got into Bitcoin, and I started studying it and learning, and I started discovering, wow, there's a lot of Christ followers here. And so I went into the Bitcoin community, and I found the believers. And then I went into the missions community, and I said, okay, where are the Bitcoiners? Okay, crickets, where are they? I couldn't find them. That was the response, like, huh, what is that? It doesn't click, I don't get it. But something's been happening. Something's been shifting and changing.
Esta semana para mí ha sido increíble poder participar con el grupo, orar, pensar la visión y el peso que Dios ha puesto para el grupo para utilizar esta herramienta y alcanzar el mundo con el Evangelio. Puede ser utilizada en mayor escala de lo que yo pensaba.
I think Bitcoin is opening doors. Because right now people is open the eyes to new opportunities. I have the tools here, the legal opportunity, so maybe I can try it.
We came here this week to see a case study on the ground of how mission practitioners are using this tool. We've got a group of Christians, Bitcoiners, entrepreneurs, missionaries that are brainstorming and learning together, learning from each other, learning from the group here on the ground. We're using this design thinking process, and it's really cool because it allows technical experts to collaborate with non-technical experts.
For pastors out there that are wondering why they should care about Bitcoin, it's kind of like saying, why should you care about the internet or other tools that are out there? Like it's something that's paradigm shifting in the world, and it's opening up all these new ways to do ministry. Bitcoin really did become a tool to help us do discipleship in a more impactful way.
I've been a mission leader for the last 16, 17 years, and unless I had somebody, a trusted person in my life that can slowly introduce me to something like Bitcoin, I'm not sure I would have pursued it on my own. So I think a trusted relationship of somebody who's in that space and sphere is a key piece to that.
We need new methods. The doors that we use, they're closed now. And now there's opportunity. Now there's people coming to us saying, help us get funds here. Help us find a way to bring community development here that doesn't create dependencies. And we're just seeing whole new opportunities and an openness to Bitcoin in this space of global impact, development, and flourishing.